There, welcome back to the Breach Report. This is Joshua with Jason once again. So we've got a pretty interesting breach report today. We're going to start off with a breach that Jason actually found on his own, doing some ad hoc threat hunting. And then we have some pretty major financial breaches that came out. Some more Microsoft Exchange exploits, probably related to the Hafnium vulnerabilities that are going on right now. And finally, we're going to finish it off talking about a ransomware attack that has actually stopped production at a major IoT manufacturer. So, Jason, let's start off with this cool little breach that you found here.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I know we have a lot of other big topics to cover, but I never really thought in a million years that my interest in security and my profession in SEO would really blend as much as they did here. And maybe it's just kind of I hear that often, especially from security practitioners, where I never thought my profession before would get me to where I am today. But where this kind of came about was I've been going through some health issues, and I started following this guy here, Dr. Gregory Johnson, chiropractor out of Houston, and he has this big YouTube channel. See here, 472,000 subscribers, and he has all these great videos on how he's helped his patients with all these different issues, and you can kind of see how he treats his patients, and the videos get a lot of views here. So one was hour ago, 1,000 views. So being kind of the SEO type of person that I am, I always kind of like to go onto people's websites, and there's always these third-party tools that you can kind of look at to assess the overall performance of a website. And so I kind of went through and I used one of my tools here called Ahrefs, um, and I was just kind of seeing at what keywords this website ranks for on Google. And you can kind of see here, this guy does very well. Advanced chiropractic relief ranks number one. A lot of the Houston chiropractor here ranks on the second page, on the second position here. But what really caught my attention was cheap Cialis and Cialis without a doctor prescription, and a few other ones, Canadian Pharmacy Cialis, and it had nothing has nothing to do um, with with chiropractors, but it is in the medical space. And so what I did was, I started to go to some of these pages here, and so you can see 2016/4/22/love is the most. And when you go to this page, it just redirects you to high quality chiropractic. So I was like, okay, that's weird. Why is this page ranking for that? It has nothing to do with Cialis. It's a redirect. And so I put this into Wayback Machine, which is the web archive.org, and you can see it basically it scrapes the world's websites and it just archives it, which is a really neat tool. And you can kind of see back here, November 25th, 2020. Here's that page that we were looking at before, 2016/4/22 love is the most. And you can see here erectile dysfunction. There's this kind of creepy malicious link here with some more targeted keywords. There's a lot of keyword stuffing and link anchor text stuffing, and there's a lot of things that, as a person in SEO, I look at and I said, okay, there's clearly malicious intent going on here. There's something, some black hat tactics that people are trying to use to fool the algorithm. And so, tools are not always infallible. So let's go and take a look at Google. And when you type in cheap Cialis on Google, on the first page here, you can see, where is it? Advanced Houston Chiropractor. And when you click on it, it actually takes you to a malicious link. And I think, Josh, you have more on that that we'll show in just one second. But one of these things that kind of gets me thinking about is gives me pause for concern, because a lot of cases these organizations, they don't know that they've been hacked. Their website, they have a web presence, but they're not looking for this. And how would you know? Unless you were in the SEO world and you were using these tools. And I imagine they don't do this. They're not aware of it. So I did reach out and I did kind of bring this up to them. I use the email address here that's at the top, info@advancedhoustonchiropractor.com. and I kind of pointed this out, and I believe that they've been hacked. And it may not be a big concern in terms of patient data, as long as the web server is isolated from the network, which hopefully it is in this case. But from a rankings perspective, this is something that it's clearly black hat. Can have big ramifications for the site owner. That could help hurt their rankings down the line, or could already be hurting their rankings. But this is just a very interesting case of people using SEO in a malicious way to promote their websites. And I'm gonna actually hand over the screen share to you, Josh, because I think you took this one step deeper.
Yeah, so man, that was a great breakdown, and again, really cool that you found that. And it just goes to show that, I mean, honestly, threat hunting can be done with some pretty rudimentary tools. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for. That intuition is a great, security researcher aspect. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show there's a few things I noticed, and some of this will be right up your alley because it's related to WordPress and SEO. Sorry, why is it looking like this? Here we go. Okay, so if I follow one of these links, right? So Chief Cialis Online, you'll notice these are advanced use in chiropractor.com, and this is love is the most, also referred to as high. Some just weird little links here. So um, if we actually click on one of these, it'll take us to this malicious website here. Look and look at, and I want you to pay attention to this, right? You see track ID equals test 3, right?
Hmm.
So let me pull this console here back up. Okay.
Is there any way to zoom in a little bit on that?
I'm trying, yeah, let me see if I can. I can't really make this any
I'm not
bigger.
on the console. Okay, no worries. No
Unfortunately,
worries.
no. But I'll talk you through what we're looking at. So first you see some red up here at the top. These are 404s on those links I actually clicked. Love is the most. The web is full of scam products, right? So that means those pages on the site you found no longer exist. They probably took them down. What they have is a 302, a temporary redirect in place. They have quite a few of them in a row. And if you look, it goes to applecreekdental.com/doc/load/search.php. And then there's a query term search equals test 3, which we just saw here on this malicious pharmacy website.
Mhm.
Track ID equals test 3. So without actually knowing what's going on here, my assumption is that that's calling to the malicious script that's been injected on yet another website. So it's possible this Apple Creek Dental website has also had malicious code injected onto their website, and it's being used as like a bounce node kind of in between um, the chiropractic website and this pharmacy. So you
Mhm.
see, you jump around here quite a bit before you actually get to this pharmacy website. So it seems like they're using, a couple compromised websites to chain these together.
Yeah, it's like they're almost masking their methods here, and tricking the algorithm, Google's algorithm in search.
So we can see if there was an archived version of that page before. Nope, doesn't look like it. So
Mm.
this is what you get when you're 404. But yeah,
Yeah.
this is why I love Brave. I've got a bunch of scripts turned off, so nothing nasty's running
Yeah,
on me.
so there's a lot of things going on here. So we I didn't actually look at the dental one yet, but I will. The Houston Chiropractor, you have it up right there. They're running on WordPress.
Yeah, so
Uh,
that's where I was gonna kind of hand it over to you a little bit. Is I looked
yeah.
at their website to see why they might have been attacked. So yeah, WordPress SEO plugin. So I think you can talk a little bit
Oh
about.
well, yeah. So I mean that's just that nothing special there. But what it does say is that it is running on WordPress on the back end. And in
Yeah,
a
I know
lot of
this little
cases, what
W.
happens with WordPress is you'll get people who, you'll buy a theme online or something, and these themes are just hodgepodges of code that are put together and bundled up as, a template or something that they sell for $60 or $70 or something like that. And if they're selling it for that amount of money, they're not doing like a secure code analysis, or there's no secure code development lifecycle. Is it optimized, and does it run for WordPress, and is it going to render correctly? So, in this case, that could be one situation here where you got a theme that's potentially open to compromise just because it's a hodgepodge of different code bases put together. Or the old way in is through plugins, so vulnerabilities that exist that aren't patched on plugins or
JavaScript.
some JavaScript, yeah. But really, this is something that I've seen before, and the fact that it's actually showing up on Google, and here's kind of the extra layer of sophistication here. The attackers knew that the websites that they're using have a medical background, and this falls under the category of YMYL, your money or your life. These are websites that give information to people that could literally cause harm to their situation, right? Their
Right.
life, their livelihood. It could, if they tell someone to put all their money into this stock and then the stock tanks, so that's why they classify it as that. So the sophisticated part here is that they targeted these sites that have medical background, have established brands. So the chiropractor has over almost 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's established. He's an authority in that space, and so I'm thinking that they're probably leveraging some of that authority in order to rank, these sites for those terms, and so that's kind of much more targeted in that way versus if they just took any blanketed old site that may not be able to fool Google as much.
Yeah, I can personally attest to how easy it is, one, to get a WordPress site going, especially with minimal security in place, and two, to how uh, honestly how easy it is to be compromised on some of these platforms. And it's really not a fault of the platform. It's 0 days, right? So I mean, we had a website up that was running on WordPress, and I'm sad to say that we did get a malicious user, they added a malicious user account through phpMyAdmin on our site. And going back and reviewing the site logs, I realized that the site had missed two updates on those plugins, and that was enough for whatever vulnerability was in those, obviously being patched in those updates, to give somebody a foothold into our site. So we had to
Yeah.
clean it out and transfer and all that stuff. So it's in this here, I'm looking at the form. I was trying to figure out, how did they inject, right? Well, again, we see WP form control. So
Mhm.
it could be a 0 day, it could be an unpatched vulnerability on the platform, but it's just, I mean, it's almost like a law of averages with this kind of stuff these days. So
Yeah, yeah, and another thing that you could do is you invest in a product like Cloudflare or something like that, where you spend 10, 15, $20 a month. They handle all the security for you. You get the DDoS protection. You have the WAF, the wireless firewall. You have other things that you might want to do is you find a trusted vendor. So WP Engine, for example, they are a trusted vendor that only does WordPress hosting,
they have
dedicated
security.
private public instances, and so they understand how those sites work and perform. And like you said, unless you're going in there and analyzing the logs, which I doubt these private practices are doing, because why would they? You wouldn't know any better. So yeah, and the thing that kind of gets me here is with these forms and everything, a lot of the times they have these why are you visiting, and first name, last name, email address, phone number, whatever, and what is the reason for your visit. And I'm not a HIPAA expert, but to some extent, if someone's saying that they have some medical condition, or they're trying to provide earnest information to help the doctor, thinking that that information is secure, does that fall under the guise of HIPAA to some extent? um, and I don't know the answer to that one, but it's something to consider. But certainly, in this case, I hope that they have everything segregated from their web server.
So one thing I do see, that appears to be a step they've taken, is those pages that were compromised have been taken down. So they are 404ing, but um, there's still some kind of hook that's allowing them to be redirected. So that's not good.
Mhm.
still for the random user. But
And it's still showing up in Google, which can
right,
sometimes take a long time to get off the rankings.
yeah, and I think we've talked about SEO being abused before by malicious users. You know, so I think that's on the rise for sure. Is abusing SEO. It's. I mean, if you can
It's
rank
yeah, I
on
mean, it's
Google, people
abusing
will
an
click.
algorithm, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
no different than just abusing an algorithm. Yeah, it's
right.
becoming more popular because that's where people search, right? It's funny because it's like people will complain about Facebook or Twitter or, the other 2 or 3 other social platforms dominating in the space when they really should be complaining about how Google dominates all of search.
Right. I mean, that's what drives the traffic, really. Um, so if you don't rank, you can say bye bye to those clicks. You know.
Yeah.
Um.
So we'll
So I,
follow up that story. We'll follow
yeah,
up with that, and we'll see if we can get some more information on that. But it was just an interesting thing that I came across.
yeah, and I think our next steps there is, we should probably take a look at that Apple Creek Dental, and maybe reach out to them as well and just let them know that, we see some malicious activity. And yeah, I'd really be curious to see, if they give us a better response. But hopefully this gets resolved soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the next story here.
Yeah, this one, I mean, I knew it was big, but after talking to you, Jason, about, some of the financial details here, this one has potential to be really big. Both of these, in fact, do. So we have two major financial breaches this week. First up is Forex trader, foreign exchange, which is for exchanging currency, much like the stock market. Uh, Major trading site FBS leaked confidential records of its users after the company left an Elasticsearch server exposed online. Ouch.
Wow.
So I think it was not last week, but the week before. We talked about that Utah testing center that had stuff in an unsecured S3 bucket. So here's yet another example of just doing it wrong. I don't know what else to say, honestly. Um,
Yeah, we've shown how easy the configurations are, and Amazon has pretty good robust documentation to if you really wanted to lock that down, you could.
as this Elasticsearch, and I mean, Elasticsearch is something that lots of people like us use for security stuff. So I mean, there's tons of books written on it. Stuff like this kind of comes down to just RTFM, man. Like, go look at, just read the guide. I mean, it's so
Mm.
simple. I mean, heck, Amazon makes it easy to set up anything. I set up that we have a Valheim server, right?
Oh yeah.
It was so simple though. And I mean, the thing is, it was simple because they have documentation. That's what blew me away, was the fact that somebody at Amazon was paid to sit down and write the SOP on setting up a Valheim dedicated server. And they have it for how to set up a non-public S3, and they have it for anything that you set up on AWS. And the reality is, there's a bunch of that kind of level of commitment on securing and setting up and building Elasticsearch and hosting these things on the cloud. So, I mean, we make light of it, but I personally don't feel like there's any excuse for this kind of thing, especially for a company like this.
Yeah.
I can kind of get a clinic or a testing center there or something, maybe like FEMA related, that you have to set up quickly. Mistakes can happen during an emergency. That's one thing, but there is no emergency here. This is a major,
You
major,
can tell when companies don't give a crap about security, and this seems like it is one of those cases. I mean,
or it's just a major, major oops. But I mean, that's like
maybe, yeah.
16 billion records is a fireable oops, in my opinion.
So,
So,
so let's talk about like the big ramifications here, because
okay.
you originally said that it was a big breach, but we
And it's a
talked about it a
global,
little bit more offline. It could be bigger than we thought.
yeah. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about the size of this company. We can talk about its customer base. And so they have more than 400,000 partners, 16 million traders. That's their customer base. And they operate in over 190 countries. So, I mean, this is a global data breach that they caused
Hmm.
themselves. I mean, look, its Android app has been downloaded over 1 million times. So, I mean, this really has a lot of outreach. Their customers are all over the world. So, we're talking about ramifications that could even include, GDPR, anything. It's 20 terabytes of data. So, this is coming to us, this info from Tech Radar here. Um, WizCase, which is they're actually they're like kind of like a news outlet. They do reviews on all kinds of stuff, but they do have a white hat threat research team that seems like they specify in cloud stuff like this specifically. So they're actually the ones who discovered that FBS had left this Elasticsearch server exposed online in October of last year. Um, the It was secured, but a few days later. But nearly 20 terabytes of that data was actually leaked, and it contained 16 billion records. And those records are billing addresses, IP addresses, time zones, passport numbers, mobile devices, Google IDs. I mean, this is everything people use to
Pretty
footprint you
much
online.
anything you wanted to do to identify someone.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting. You brought up GDPR, and this gets me thinking about privacy and the whole debate that's going on in the United States, which shouldn't really be a debate, but there, like, if a hospital's has a compromise and patient records get leaked, it's something like $10,000 per incident, right? Of a fine or higher,
yep,
right?
yep,
But in the United States, when a customer has their private, just a user has their personal identifiable information leaked online, what is the actual monetary fine? What, like, how at the end of the day are these end users being protected? Because, especially when there's financial motivation, right? So, like, I'm thinking of, like, the whole thing that happened with Wall Street Bets and, like, Robinhood and Webull and all these apps that start popping up, and people will get emotional and they're like, I need to sign up for this app. This is my opportunity to make real money, or whatever. And they just willingly give over their information without even considering whether or not this company is locking their stuff down.
yeah. Just like that NFT dude who lost 150K because he just didn't even set up two-factor. And there was
Yeah.
nothing that prevented that situation from happening. So I mean, we can kind of pin it on the user if we want, like everybody else does. But the reality is it's on the platform to offer the path of least resistance to be the safest path. Now I mean, this here, like, this is an even worse situation. It's like users never even had a chance, right? This is 100% back end failure from FBS's side. um, so it didn't matter if you had two-factor authentication on and all this stuff as a user, your data was still leaked because they just put it up online, openly. So, and
Here's an interesting question. Do you think that these large companies that collect this type of information should have to publicly disclose that they've gone through some type of risk assessment or penetration testing or something to prove to users that their platform is at least has some baseline of security?
I do, and some countries' governments do, and I know the state of California's government does. They've got some
Is that the
forward.
CCPA or
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
It's consumer protection laws. I think Australia has some really good ones around this as well. But absolutely, it's a requirement, and it also has the requirements. A lot of them that they report breaches publicly, almost like an SEC type filing right
Mhm.
away as soon as they learn about it, which is good. I mean, it's important. Now, I like things like GDPR because GDPR actually puts the data control in the data subject's hands, and what that means is your data belongs to you. Even if you put it on their
Mhm.
platform, it's your data. And so you can tell them to get rid of it. You can tell them what they can and cannot do with it. And you can request access to, see where it is going and all that kind of information.
You're the landlord of your data. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, you own your data. You get to say what people can and can't do with it.
right.
Yeah, no, but the problem is people willingly sign it away when they sign that 50-page term and condition. And if
That's
you don't get to use the app. So,
right. So
that's
GDPR has been combating that as well. So you might have seen some changes to those cookie flags in
hmm
the last few years.
Google's
So
having issues with trying to get that to roll out.
So first they've been
certain
popping up.
advertisers.
You see them all the time, and one change that was a little more subtle, you may not have noticed it, but it used to just be that there was only like an OK button. It's like, here's the cookies we have, and you can just click OK,
Yeah,
right? Now you
didn't do
actually
anything.
a lot of websites have multiple buttons, and you can customize your
Yeah,
cookies, right? That's a GDPR uh, impact, in fact.
interesting. So you can
Yes.
toggle, okay, on the
It
fly.
had to give users the option. You can't just say, no, screw you. You didn't accept the cookies, so bye, right? You have to say, no, I'd only want to use your website and not be tracked, right? That
Hmm.
gives you that power. So, um, and so we kind of swayed away from your original question, which was, do you think that companies should be held responsible? And I think the HIP example is good. I think the SEC or somebody like some kind of body like that should be just as equally stringent, so that if this is clearly their fault,
Hmm.
they should be fined for this, and they're probably
And it can't
they're
just be a
probably going to get
slap on the
sued,
wrist, though.
right?
Like
No, I mean
that's
they
a
need to get
because it's just
trouble,
cost of doing business for a lot of these people. That's what it's
right?
acceptable risk, right? That's what it
Right.
is. Yeah,
Yep.
that's a shame.
So we're on the financial track, and so let's jump
Mhm.
on to our next one. So CNA Financial is a Chicago-based surety and fidelity bonds company. It's the seventh largest one in the world in terms of revenue.
You can tell by their website; it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, so you notice it doesn't look so great today, right? So this company has sustained a cybersecurity attack. And now if you go to CNA.com or CNA Surety or CNAFinancial.com, you will get something similar to this message, which says on March 21st, CNA determined that it sustained a sophisticated cybersecurity attack. The attack caused a network disruption and impacted certain CNA systems, including corporate email. Upon learning of the incident, we immediately engaged a team of third-party forensics experts to investigate and determine the full scope of this incident, which is ongoing, which is what pretty much what everybody says, right? But what's this was clearly a big issue. Now they're saying out of an abundance of caution, but in all the breaches we've been looking at, I've not seen somebody's website look like this.
Yeah,
So
this is pretty major.
yeah, I mean, and if you go to any of their sites, this is what you get. And at first, I was trying to research this. I was a little bit troubled because I'm like, how am I going to get information about this company? I can't find anything. This is all they have. Um, but I mean, they're obviously hit pretty hard. Now, going over here to msspalert.com, they've got the same message here, but they have a little bit more information. Their annual revenue was $10 billion in 2020, so that tells you how big of a company this is. What they're saying is it's a ransomware attack, but um, they're not really being they don't give us much information about like what the ransom is, what they're asking for, or anything like that. We just know
Yeah.
that it's so sophisticated or so impactful, rather, that I mean their site's offline. Nobody can do anything at this company right now
So I'm
because
I'm I'm kind of curious here. So you said that they're involved in the bond market.
yeah.
You know how big the bond market is? Pretty
So
big.
I googled this just a little bit ago. It is 100 billion. Was it billion?
100 trillion.
Trillion. There was a T. Okay, yeah.
100
It's
trillion. That's how large the bond market is in the US.
yeah.
And in the stock market, I think we looked that up too, is about
Was a
30
third.
trillion.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give you like the scope of how big those are. The one thing that I found kind of interesting in all of this was that they mentioned it was a sophisticated attack. And the reason why I bring this up is all attacks these days are starting to become sophisticated, but sophisticated doesn't necessarily mean it was a fancy, tool set that they used, or zero day, or some specific type of malware. Sometimes sophisticated can just mean they got creative. They just thought of a new way of getting around a system, and it doesn't need to necessarily be this long, like drawn out attack like we saw with SolarWinds with
Mhm.
the APT groups. Um, but it is interesting how people keep referring to things as sophisticated attacks when it's just, hey, they got clever.
Yeah. I agree with you, and there's a couple things I see companies doing with this term sophisticated. Like this is a red flag for me, right? It could be true. Absolutely could be true, but a lot of times this is like the response to kind of sort of like your get out of jail free card, right? Because a
Yeah,
lot of companies these days have millions and millions and
soften the
millions of
blow.
dollars of insurance cyber insurance. So part of cyber insurance though is they don't just pay, right? If you're attacked, you have to still do your due diligence and prove to your insurance underwriters that you've got your compliance and you have all your, all your ducks around, that you're making an effort to be secure. But then if that's saying you took all precautions and things happen and you got attacked, so they'll pay out. So sometimes it's kind of that, it's like a, well, it was pretty sophisticated, so there's nothing we could have done about it. And maybe that's true, but a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's just kind of
They
a
click the
hype.
link or
Yeah.
yeah, something.
Now here's what also is another thing that stands out to me, is including corporate email, and it could just be a red herring, but there is that ongoing major a Microsoft Exchange, excuse me, Microsoft Exchange uh, vulnerability that's been referred to as the Hafnium cyber attack, or it's the Hafnium group. We talked about Nobelium. Hafnium is one that's affecting Exchange. It's been being abused by a lot of cyber actors, which is actually something we're going to talk about in the next one. But maybe this was a result of that vulnerability as part of that campaign. Uh, possibly not APT, but just somebody else, right, using the same vulnerability. So
Yeah. I would hate to be the people who I would hate to have my insurance through these people, because could you imagine? I don't know what kind of insurance they do, but could you imagine if you got in a car wreck and you couldn't you
yeah.
couldn't get your money? Like, I gotta get a
So
job, I gotta go to my work. How do we get there?
I don't know a whole lot about that, but there's surety bonds, which is like it's insurance bonds, where it's like private. It's more like private insurance, but I think there's other uses for those bonds as well, for like major insurance, like insuring. Um, for example, I know one use is insuring partnerships, like law partnerships. It's like if you
Hmm.
have multiple lawyers at the law firm, instead of having each one of them have their own malpractice and other insurances, like the whole firm can have a giant surety bond that just covers the whole firm against stuff. So,
I see.
but there's all kinds of stuff like that. It's big time insurance, right? That's what
Hmm.
this is. But I think really the financial bonds, and you said this earlier, is the potentially the bigger snack here, right? For the malicious actors, there's way more money in that. So,
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mentioned ransomware, Microsoft Exchange. So coming to us from securityaffairs.co, security experts report that a second ransomware gang named Black Kingdom is targeting Microsoft Exchange servers. So this is coming behind the Hafnium APT attacks that have been, making most of the headlines here. Something we also saw with SolarWinds, right, as a secondary wave of
Mhm.
attacks. And I think really everything these days is going to be seeing that, waves and waves of attacks on the same vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
Um,
especially as they become more as they uncover them, right? They're still actively investigating this, and we
of
talked about
course.
this at the very beginning of all of it. It takes months, years, even.
Oh, months and years for sure. I mean, yeah, years these days with something like this, with a Microsoft Exchange level hack. And this one, we said it, public disclosure of proxy logon vulnerabilities, which is part of that whole ongoing Exchange crisis, is almost what I want to call it, right? So
Yeah, strong
um,
into it.
the first gang was called Deer Cry, and so this is another I think this is an opportunistic rather than the perpetrators, right?
Hmm.
um, we see this a lot. Somebody major like China or Russia will develop a vulnerability, a 0-day hacking framework, and then people start using it.
Yeah, they kind of open the floodgates to all of this. They say, "Hey, everyone, we hacked this. Get yours."
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. Everybody can do it, and a lot of these things make it into publicly accessible tools, like the tool you can get from Rapid7. I don't know why I can't think of its name right now. Metasploit. There we go.
All right.
That's just it's a security testing framework, but it's super basic. You can look up YouTube videos on how to use it and become you know a pen tester, quote unquote. I mean, obviously it takes more than that, but there's actual malware in there that works. It's POCs, but it works, and it's something anybody can download. And it's, if you know what you're doing, you can take those POCs and turn them into actual malicious attacks, weaponizing proofs of concept, something we've already covered as well. So this one's really funny because um, the ransomware here didn't work at first. So coming from this researcher, Malware Tech, on Twitter, he says someone ran the script on all vulnerable Exchange servers via proxy logon vulnerability, which is the ongoing vulnerability. Claims to be Black Kingdom ransomware, but it doesn't appear to encrypt files, just drops a ransom.
Well, that's embarrassing.
Right. However, so that was posted on March 21st. 2 days later, Kevin Beaumont on Twitter says Black Kingdom ransomware on my personal servers. It does indeed encrypt files. They exclude C Windows. However, my storage servers were in a different folder and it encrypted those. So it looks like somewhere in between, whoever was building this script
They patched
went,
their shit.
yeah, they went, whoops, we screwed up our dev life cycle and we gotta patch it in prod, right? So, man, everybody has dev problems. Red Hat, or I mean, Black Hat and White Hat, right? Both sides.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the bad guys are still patching their stuff before the good guys.
But I think what that shows is, and maybe it was just an accident, but maybe these guys are not that sophisticated, right? Maybe it's
Yeah,
like two people. Maybe it's just one guy who's just doing this after hours in work, or maybe it's a group of people from all around the world, whatever. But it doesn't take much anymore once a vulnerability has been made public. If you know how to, you don't need a ton of programming experience to know how to do this kind of stuff. Once you understand the
yeah,
commands.
or a room full of people. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but it's also
two
more
people.
accessible. I mean, kids are doing this stuff in school now. I mean, even in elementary school, they're
You,
doing.
they're not just learning to type; they're learning to code.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So this one was it's just kind of funny, but even though it started off maybe a little bit benign, it became serious, and that's, man, if that's not the story of cybersecurity, right? Is everything becomes more serious if you just leave it alone.
yeah, that's
Can't let it
true.
fester.
Well, that's very true. And
Right.
I think we got one more ransomware. Is it a ransomware story?
It's a ransomware story. There's so many
Oh,
of
oof,
those.
couldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, right. 2021 ransomware. What?
Yeah.
All right. Threat post. It's talking about IoT giant Sierra Wireless. They're a Canadian-based company.
Interesting.
They're a
Okay.
multinational manufacturer, and they create all kinds of equipment for comms, gateways, routers, cellular modems, and modules, smart connectivity solutions for IoT devices. So like all the networky antenna type stuff that's in all kinds of things. So
Basically anything to do with communications, which is like a pillar of our information era.
anything wireless, yep.
That's scary. Okay.
So this attack hit them on March 20th and it actually pushed their systems offline and halted production across its manufacturing sites. Boom.
Wow.
That, that's what we've been talking about is what's the worst case scenario? Everything stops. Already happened to Molson Coors,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
The downstream supply chain implications too, right? So all those vendors that are waiting for parts or, you know, they're waiting for the router to get completed so they can ship it off to the customer, or the customer not able to complete the sale, they go to a competitor. There's a lot of money that's just lost in that transaction on top of the ransom.
Yeah, and this is, if you've been paying attention to the news, this is not a good year for anything with chips in it.
Yeah.
We've had a chip shortage. Um, Believe it or not, the Ever Given incident in the Suez Canal led to more of that. It had a lot of chips on board. That's why they were in such a rush to get it out before the week, because like uh, you know, days
Yeah.
is one thing, but weeks is another, right? And then now we've got an IoT or a wireless chip manufacturer, being hit. So like it just
I would say like some of the craze with the chip shortage is cryptocurrency
yeah.
mining and probably gaming. If I were to stake it, it'd probably be those two things that are really pushing that. And then I think with the Suez Canal, I read somewhere it was like $10 billion a day
Whew.
in lost revenue or
Yeah.
value or whatever that however they categorize $10 billion. Yeah, it's insane.
Wow. Yeah, just it's been a crazy year with economic impact from all sorts of different things, and I think the cyber impact has been bigger than ever really this year on financial systems.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because we've been tracking it more or, being immersed in it, or if it just truly is, you start to see the figures or the stats come to life of, cybercrime is up 600% since the pandemic or something like that, and you
Right.
start to see it actually materialize in these breach reports.
I mean, it's getting hard to pick just five. When I go through my breach feeds, it's like 2 to 3 a day,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and it's difficult, like, which ones should we cover? How, which ones are the ones that are actually worth talking about? And in this case, I think, there's so many different financial implications here, right? So we were just talking about the supply chain implications. There's a ransom implication. Who knows how many millions of dollars they're going to ask for? But there's also a valuation implication. We kind of did like some bare bones math. We were looking at their stock price the day of. It was like $16 a share, and then it dropped to about $15 a share, and I think it's somewhere around 14.50 right now. But we estimated just that drop in share price is somewhere around $30 million in lost valuation. So the impact of this is, if just based on the math, I mean, could be $100 million plus.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a $530 million market cap company. That's how we came to that number. And so this statement here is what really really makes you kind of concerned about that financial impact. Is due to the disruptions caused by the cyber attack, the company is also withdrawing its first quarter 2021 guidance, which has been provided on February 23rd. So, and Jason, you can talk a little more about what that is because it's kind of I don't really know, but
Sorta, not really up my alley, but I mean, generally speaking, public companies will have their guidance for the years, their prospectus. So, like I like to use mining companies, or like, as an example, just because it's tangible, right? So you can say a mining company is going to mine 100 million ounces of copper, or pounds of copper rather, in a given year. And you kind of understand based on what the price of the commodity is, and you kind of get an understanding of what that company is worth and what they're expected to produce that year. But if you were to cut that guidance in half, and you only go to 50 million pounds in that year, then you're effectively saying, hey, we're not going to be making a lot of money, right? This has had such a big impact on our bottom line revenue that we need to go back in from our guidance that we provided to our shareholders, um, and revise that. And that's typically who that's for. It's for the shareholders. It's to give
wow.
them, um, to tell them, hey, look, we're going to do this much revenue this year. Keep investing in us, keep giving us, buying our shares, keep, we need that liquidity. We want to drive our stock price up, whatever. So that's typically why that they provide guidance.
Right. So wow, I mean, that's basically saying we're definitely not going to be making that much money this year because of this attack, right?
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, that's would be the assumption in this case, or it could be that, this quarter, don't expect this quarter earnings reports to be great. Like
Right.
it, like it's be prepared for that. And sometimes the market prices into it, which it obviously it did. The moment, or the few days following the announcement of the breach, the stock price went down, that, and maybe, that is kind of pricing that in already, that $30 million, you can kind of tie this into that. That's likely what it is.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's
Net drop in valuation.
yeah. Still, I mean, that's news nobody wants to hear, and I mean that's probably the worst case scenario. Like I said, from ransomware is halted production, loss of revenue. I mean,
Well, loss of customers, even, like,
yeah,
how many of those customers are going to stay with this company after, a lot of them probably have long-term contracts and won't butt out, but come renewal time, they're going to look back and be like, hey, you guys got hacked.
yeah,
We might change all of our production manufacturing for, they're not doing the full thing for a lot of these things. They might be doing one component. It could be a screw for, a specific
right.
screw. But they're doing it at volume, and they could be multi-million-dollar contracts. So these companies might say, "You got hacked. We have a new policy." A lot of these big companies, they're promoting. They're not promoting. They're giving more visibility at the table for the CISOs, for chief information security officers. They're now starting to sit at the table with the rest of the C-suite, and a lot of what they have to say is starting to influence how people make decisions within the organization. So if a CISO of one of these manufacturers, or one of these companies that use this manufacturer, looks at this and says, "Look, we can't expose ourselves to this level of risk. I mean, we're better off, diversifying our risk by breaking it up into three different suppliers, so that that are not linked in any ways. And if one supplier goes down, we can at least still have two other suppliers that are operational." That dispersion of risk, that dispersion of that threat. You might be paying a little bit more, but this is where you get into that risk analysis, that risk assessment. It does this cost justify us, um, to protect us from, having these supply chain issues in the future.
Yeah, the cost analysis is always a big part of it, and I mean it's a tough decision, and I think CISOs and CFOs are going to be really making some tough decisions, and it's going to get harder to make those decisions with these budgets because I mean we joked about the $10 million IT budget, but when is that only a matter of time that that's one of your major budgetary departments in a company,
Mhm.
and it's just the cost of doing business.
Absolutely. Yeah, it will. It's a time thing, and it's what it really is. It's like any of these legacy companies that just didn't, adapt to their digital transformation. If they haven't started doing it now, they're already going to be behind the companies that are only investing in the newer age ways of doing things. Like integrating technology into their supply chain forecasting, and so many other aspects of it. Not to get too deep into it, but yeah, I definitely see it changing, in the near future. But I mean, it's the cost right now. It's until security becomes more affordable, or until people start actually putting money up front for it. We're going to see these breaches all the time. I mean, it's not going to stop, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think right now one of the best options really is the cloud because the cloud helps us kind of consolidate responsibility a little bit. You're still responsible for configuring the stuff you put in the cloud, but those underlying systems, Amazon, Azure, Google, they take on a lot more responsibility for parts of the confidentiality, availability, and integrity of the stuff that you store on their and operate on their clouds. So, in taking that part of it off of your company and your employees, you can focus on your internal stuff, on making sure that you've got employees who are less prone to social engineering, and you've got architectures inside where you still require non-cloud stuff, being
Mhm.
safe, that you have policies that make sense for the modern
Yeah,
day.
I mean, it's a CYA, it's a cover your ass, but the problem with that is when with hafnium, right? You know, you defer that responsibility to someone else, but it doesn't mean that it still can't hurt you.
Yep.
That's the downside. So,
Yeah, I mean, defense in depth, layering security, and just hope, a little bit of hope.
a little bit of hope. I mean,
Yeah.
it really comes down to, is what you're protecting really worth it? And if it is, spend the money to protect it, because if bad guys really want in, they're going to get in if they have the means to do so.
Yeah, I think we talked about patcher stuff before, but I think a big name now is data classification, right?
Hmm. Yeah, understand what type of data. That's actually a good point. We speak to CTOs, CIOs, and CISOs all the time, Josh. You and I on these calls, and we have these friendly conversations, and we ask them, what kind of data do you store? Do you have any PII? Do you have any PHI? Do you know what tell us about your data classification? And a lot of the cases, and it's not always the fault of these individuals, but in a lot of cases, they don't know.
Right. Or they're just like, yeah, we have it, but It's everywhere, right? It's
Yeah,
just a
it's dispersed
smattering. It's not
throughout. Yeah.
segregated, right? Yeah, that's the part that you can focus more on if you give up the infrastructure ops to the cloud,
Yeah.
right? Then even if there is a Microsoft Exchange attack, if your data has been properly classified and you have put in the security necessary, like your really secure data, you can put those behind secret servers. You can get HashiCorp,
Yeah.
you can have quadruple factor authentication to even move data. You know, that's but and that's
It might
hard to
take you
do.
30
But if
minutes to log in, but
yeah,
it's secure.
but and that's fine if it's like, well, why do you even need to log into that data unless you're auditing it, right? Like
Yeah.
patient data, right? Stuff that really is that secret, you can consolidate down. So that's cheaper than trying to implement that for the entire company. That's completely unfeasible. So that's why data classification matters, is where to spend the money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. One, I think you got my wheels turning on some new articles that I want to write about that now. All right,
Awesome.
Josh. Well, this has been a really great breach report. We did a little bit of primary research. Well, we'll have to maybe we'll have to spin that off as like a separate segment, or maybe we'll include that a little bit more as we continue
Maybe you
to
got
do
to
the
maybe you got a new career coming here.
maybe, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, just kind of fell in the lap.
there
Just
you
all
go.
those things kind of converging. But yeah, thanks for putting this together as always, Josh. Is there any final thoughts on this?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff today, and it was great conversation, great commentary, and again, awesome work on that threat hunting you did there. So it's cool. These. I guess my final thought is I feel like these are getting better. I mean, we had Ken on last week, and that was a
How's it
really
been?
great analysis of the crypto side of things. And we had you finding something, so I love it. It's cool. It's really starting to come together. And
I love self-flattery. Well, until next week. This has been the Breach Report. Thank you.